Here's your grand weathercast. 60 degrees in the driver's seat. In the passenger seat, a high of 66. In the second and third rows, a balmy 70 degrees. Just the way Grandma likes it.
With 3-zone automatic climate control, life's grander in the first ever Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.
I want people to understand this ordeal. It's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
To get the Crime Writers on After Show right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, he terrorized the nation with rants about technology and bombs in the mail. 25 years later, what have we learned about Ted Kaczynski? We'll review the Apple original podcast, Project Unabom. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of Dead on Deadline, my friend, Laura Bricker. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Rebecca.
And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, author of the City Trilogy, host of the Strange Arrivals podcast, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast, Toby Ball. Hello, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is a Monday.
It is a Monday, yes.
This show is dropping. Not everyone is listening to it on a Monday. We should acknowledge that. What is coming up on our next podcast coming out next week?
Well, next Monday, we are going to be talking about Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, yeah.
Season 2.
Yes.
Out now on Hulu. By the way, for those folks on Patreon, you're going to be able to watch us record that live. A little more information coming up later in the show when we talk about the business.
All right. So are we going to have special guest Steve Martin on next week?
It's up to you, Rebecca. You and Toby have his ear on Twitter, not Kevin Flynn, not Laura Bricker.
Yes. Toby, are we going to start our campaign to get Steve Martin to show up to our Zoom? Is that the plan?
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll just have to send him that link.
Well, he's got to join Patreon in order to get the link, Steve Martin.
Well, I think
it's a good deal. $5 a month. You get almost 300 exclusive podcasts.
We're not going to let Steve in for free?
Fuck no.
Steve?
Steve's got the cheddar. He's Steve Martin.
We're going to make Steve we're going to make Steve have to pay $5 a month.
We are. Yeah. We are. In fact, if it's Steve Martin, I might say, I'm sorry, Steve, it's 50.
No, he's got to do at least 6.
Okay.
He's got to get on the Bricker scale.
He's got to get the Bricker scale stuff, too.
I mean, we have other celebrities in there, so why shouldn't Steve be one of them, right?
Stop rocking the fucking boat, Rebecca.
I would give it to Steve for free. I'm just saying.
Oh, great. My wife just said she'll give it to Steve for free, yes.
That's between you and Kevin.
And Steve.
Yeah.
And Steve, yeah.
All right. Well, I'm excited. I haven't, as of the time of this taping, I haven't watched any of it yet. I'm really excited to watch it. It's been the one thing that I've been looking forward to in these dark times in our democracy. I don't know about you guys, but I am down for some Only Murders in the Building to brighten my world. So looking forward to that. All right. So, Kevin, I am ready to talk about this podcast's topic. Are you ready to do that?
Totally ready.
I'm going to go ahead and drop that first clip. Leading off.
Kaczynski has steadfastly refused interview requests from the media for the past 2 decades. He told one journalist that he would only be talking to, quote, 100% committed, far-out, rabid anti-tech radicals. I wrote him. I never heard back.
Having evaded authorities for 17 years, the criminal known as the Unabomber is ready to make a deal. If newspapers will print his manifesto, he will stop killing people. But his anti-technology rants sound familiar to the family of Ted Kaczynski.
I'm going to turn to Linda and say, see, I could definitely tell you it's not him. Instead, oh my gosh, my heart started to sink,
When the disheveled, cabin-dwelling Kaczynski is arrested, it confirms everyone's suspicion that the culprit was a madman. But how did he go from mathematics professor to serial bomber? And were there other ways the story could have gone?
It came to involve not only the federal agents who chased him and the victims left in his wake, but everyone from the most powerful decision-makers in Washington to a group of Dungeons and Dragons fanatics in Chicago, to a man who lived for years in a hole in the high desert.
Produced by Pineapple Street Studios, the Apple original podcast Project Unabom tells the story of a nation and a family coming to grips with what was happening inside a tiny cabin in the Montana woods. Host Eric Benson digs into Kaczynski's personal papers and talks to key people from the investigation, including those first suspected of being the Unabomber. Spoiler alert, we are going to be talking about plot points from Project Unabom. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Laura, this podcast is set up in a place, the story is set up in a place largely where I was not expecting it to be set up, which is the Washington Post newsroom. What did you think about that thread of these news directors and this newsroom head grappling with whether or not to publish Ted Kaczynski's manifesto and that entire journalism narrative to kick off this story?
Well, you know me, I love any time that we get a behind the scenes look at a newsroom, at journalists at work. You know, having worked in a newsroom, I always like to hear how other newsrooms, obviously I did not work at the Washington Post. I worked at a local group of newspapers here in New Hampshire, but I liked the contacts they set it up. Like, this is the guy who worked with Woodward and Bernstein. Like, he is somebody that has been in journalism for an extremely long time. And, you know, at the same time, now he's getting this phone call from, you know, somebody at like the head of the FBI or like the assistant to the head of the FBI to talk about this letter. So you see sort of this struggle between journalism ethics and, you know, being independent and not beholden to anybody when publishing the story. At the same time, though, you know, as a journalist, I'm thinking this letter is a story, but we're also being held hostage by it. So it's a really, I don't know, a very difficult decision. And it's hard to know if you were in that person's shoes, what you would have done, because it is something that's definitely a pretty gray area when it comes to journalism.
What I said to him and he said to me was, we're normally rivals on news stories. We cannot be rivals on this. We cannot let this guy play us off one against the other. We have to have a united response.
One of the things that struck me, Toby, is that this is pre-9/11. And the FBI came and, first of all, they alerted the Washington Post that they were going to be getting the manifesto. They came then and took it, the original copy, but then they brought back like a photocopy of it. And I was like, whoa, like, I don't think that the post 9/11 FBI necessarily would have done that. But then the FBI really like worked with them and seemed not confident and grappled with this decision internally and worked with the Washington Post and had meetings with them. And I was just really struck by the pre-9/11 FBI and how just different they felt and seemed compared to the post-9/11 FBI in terms of like confidence, in terms of like wherewithal. Because it seemed like post-9/11, the FBI is just like, hard line, black and white. We don't do this. We don't share information. We don't, you know what I mean? It just seemed like a more public friendly, journalism friendly, information friendly agency. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it was probably pretty narrow window in which this happened, where you go from like Hoover, you know. So there was probably like a good like 30 years maybe where you could get the FBI to deal with the press in a way that was sort of open and in some ways collaborative. But yeah, I mean, I was in DC when this was printed. I mean, I remember when the Post came out with this. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. And I think it's the same. It's a question that gets faced again and again and again, and not quite these exact details, but it's like, how much do you give in to somebody who's threatening harm, whether it's paying a ransom or releasing prisoners or, you know, publishing this manifesto? The idea being that once you set the precedent that you're going to meet the demands, that you're kind of opening up the Pandora's box for everybody wanting to suddenly get a piece of that. But in fact, that didn't happen, right? It wasn't suddenly a whole bunch of people sending in manifestos or else or maybe there were, but they just never got published. So, in the end, it seems like it's the right decision. I mean, they talk about this a little bit. The piece itself is kind of interesting. Like if you actually read it, it's weird, but it's got like definite points it makes pretty strongly.
It is interesting to think about, Kevin. The timing of this podcast. Laura sent a note about the timing of this podcast and why now. And I just kept thinking like...
That's always Laura's question.
I know.
Why now?
I know. But to me, the why now is, and Laura, I'm going to answer it for you right now. To me, the why now is, A, there is new information in this podcast, which I already have gleaned. But also the why now is, today, I'm not 100% sure that Ted Kaczynski wouldn't be seen as like an alt-right hero versus a vilified terrorist. I'm just not 100% sure he wouldn't be seen that way, right?
There's an incel.
Right, because a lot of the things, like I'm not the anti-tech and all that stuff, but a lot of the other things that he talks about are, and I'm not sure that his points of view would be the same as they were then now, but he's like, just his way of sort of being and communicating and like, is not out of line with people who are now held up as sort of like heroes by a sect of our society now, and they just communicate differently now because of the internet, right? But Kevin, you were also...
That's sort of the irony, right?
Yeah.
Is that, the technology around us... What was this quote from Web of Make-Believe, which was something about how the technology around us is as imperceptible as water is to fish?
Yeah.
And you're right, it's just all around us. And if, in another timeline that the Unabomber was active during the era of social media, it is that technology that would have propelled him to a different kind of status. He did okay, though, on the infamy level, just being the Unabomber.
Right.
Though.
And when they read sections of his writings and they're like, the elite class doesn't care about you or whatever, I'm like, you're kind of right about that kind of stuff. Like it is kind of frightening that he is a little bit right.
And they talk about this, is that Kaczynski, obviously, he is, mentally ill. He has a violent streak, but he's also a very smart guy.
Genius
level IQ. So he is not your typical nut job, is what they would say. So the things that he writes, while they may be unhinged, he's coming from a place of deeply reasoned, for him anyway, right? It isn't spur of the moment kind of stuff. He's thought this stuff out. And this is what we hear everybody say. We hear the editors say that they get these crazy letters all the time. This one was different, and they immediately knew it. And I think the reason, by the way, that they went to the FBI to get another set of eyes in the situation because it was new, and, they took their advice and they thought about it. I think if the FBI strongly said, do not, they might not have. I think if the FBI says, yeah, go ahead and do it, then they're still going to make their own decision.
Yeah. I think the fact that the FBI grappled with it, helped them, more grapple with it. It felt like
it was a tough call all the way around. In the end, it was the right call because it did instigate the capture of Kaczynski.
Kaczynski, yes. That is the other pronunciation of the name, a thing that was a funny fact.
I worked with a guy whose name was Ted Kaczynski.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was spelled the same way.
Guess
I don't
what?
know.
His name was also Ted Kaczynski.
Yeah, we didn't call him that.
Is this podcast. So, Kevin, we will talk about that discovery of, who recognized the manifesto writing later, because to me that was very new. But one of the things that you wrote a note about, and I really appreciate that you did, was the sound of the show.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I've ever said this, but it has, I'll use the term, an alluring sound. It feels like a This American Life story in all the best ways as far as the sound design. Eric has a very pleasant speaking voice. I noticed the music, the music beds, they have no percussion, right? So it's just making this sort of atmospheric and soothing in a little sort of light jazzy way.
There were his diagnoses of where we had gone wrong. The system has to force people to behave in ways that are increasingly remote from the natural pattern of human behavior. There were his fears for how it could get worse. The technophiles are taking us all on an utterly reckless ride into the unknown.
It's an underutilized sound design in our genre, so I don't know why that struck me, but it was done really, really well here, and so it matched the pacing the right way, and so I thought, this sounds like, the prestige podcasts that we've heard, like from, This American Life serial, the way those sound designs are crafted. I thought it was well done.
beautifully crafted. The synthesizer set music is gorgeous. Really, really well suited to this, especially thematically, time period wise, and in terms of sort of like the technology story wise. Your observations are spot on. This podcast is produced by Jonathan Manhevar, a veteran of This American Life who now works at Pineapple Street Studios. Just so you know, he also produced another podcast that we loved the sound of, which was The Clearing.
Oh, right.
Which introduced a whole new like true crime music genre that we haven't heard before and since, which was the clarinet beds. I don't know if you remember the musical scoring to The Clearing, which was singular.
From Doylestown, it was Ocala, Florida, and then a short little stay in Arizona, then on to Brighton, Colorado for a year, on to Watertown, Wisconsin for just a couple months. After Watertown, Wisconsin, it was Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania for a year.
And also, this podcast is reported and narrated by Eric Benson, who co-reported my favorite podcast of last year, Suspect. So he worked with Matt Sharon.
I thought you were going to say
Suspect.
Manslaughter.
No. But he also did work on Suspect. So it is just like, there is sort of like a bit of a dream team working on this show. So the way that it sounds and the way that it's put together, like if it had sounded kind of shitty, I would have been extremely disappointed.
Here's your grand weathercast. 60 degrees in the driver's seat. In the passenger seat, a high of 66. In the second and third rows, a balmy 70 degrees. Just the way Grandma likes it.
With 3-zone automatic climate control, life's grander in the first ever Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.
I want people to understand this ordeal, it's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac, and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
All right, so Kevin, here we are in the business section.
Yes.
It's time for you to do your business. What have we got going on in the business section today, Kevin?
Well, over on Patreon, we have the latest episode of Leave It to Bricker.
We do. What are we talking about over there?
Laura Bricker, fill us in. What adventures are you getting into in your quaint AF town of Exeter, New Hampshire?
Well, the adventures include some of our visitors to my quaint AF town, including Elon Green. And Elon and I are going to talk about something kind of crazy that happened when he came to Exeter that may or may not have involved Rebecca's mother and her childhood.
This is author Elon Green, author of Last Call.
Yes, the great book.
And great. Well, if it involves Rebecca's mother, I'm sure it's not annoying.
Wait, it doesn't involve my childhood, right? It involves a story that my mother told, right?
A story that your mother told that might have
I know this one.
originated in the area that you grew up
Oh,
on.
it totally did. It totally
Long
did.
Island.
And
Yes.
this was a story that she told, and can I just like preview it a little bit, Kevin?
Sure.
So it had to do with Elon Green's book, tangentially, and she sent me a wild text message about a murder that I then read to the whole table of people at the dinner prior to Elon Green's book event. And I was like, everybody, now that you're all assembled, let me read to you out loud this text message my mother sent me. And the whole table was gobsmacked. And then it became an entire thing. Did you chase my mom down and ask her about it, Laura?
Oh, yeah. We had a big conversation about it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. We're just going to have to listen to the episode.
Cannot wait to hear that. See how that. I didn't ask my mom any follow-up questions, so I can't wait to hear what you got out of it. Anyway, all right. So Kevin, what else have we got going on?
Well, it's not too late to sign up for Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. On Thursday, this Thursday at 8 o'clock Eastern, we are going to be doing a live show for our patrons. You'll be able to join us on Zoom. You'll see Toby and Laura and Rebecca and I.
Me?
We're going to be recording next week's show, and that's the show when we're talking about Only Murders in the Building Season 2. Maybe Steve Martin will join us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Probably not.
I'm 100%.
Seems likely.
You know, I'll just DM him. He'll slide into my DMs.
Slide in, yeah, I'm sure.
And I'd be like, hey, Steve, want to come join us on our Zoom?
Yeah, that would be awesome. By the way, just a reminder, Steve Martin still does not follow me, but he does follow Toby Ball and Rebecca Lavoie.
And Crime Writers On.
Does he follow Crime Writers?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine. Then I guess he's following
He follows
me.
like 200 people, including Toby, me, and Crime Writers On. It's wild.
Still no Kevin Flynn, though, but all right. So if you
didn't want it as bad as I did.
Yeah, you were pretty fucking thirsty, Toby. I listened to that one. Yeah.
I've been thirsty once on the show, and it was then.
And it paid off. It definitely paid off.
I check, just so you know, once in a while. It's like the only thing that excites me about logging onto Twitter is the fact that, I'm conscious of it all the time. It so excites me. I'm such a huge fan. But once in a while, I have this like gripping fear maybe he doesn't follow me anymore. It's like once every couple of months, I just like check. Does he still follow me? And he's like, as of this taping, he still does. So I do check every so often.
He likes bold women.
Oh, either that or he never checks his Twitter. All right, so Kevin, before we wrap up the business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Yes, our Patreon patron saints are Susan Howard and Marcy Vale. Bless you.
Bless you, Susan and Marcy. Thank you to you guys and to everyone for supporting us on Patreon. And of course, thanks to everyone else for listening to the show every week. And if that ends the business section, Kevin, I think I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now.
Fade the music out, because the business section thus has ended.
Toby Ball, I was extremely excited to hear that there was a Harvard thread in this podcast and Ted Kaczynski's time there. I know that this is not an important part of the story and that it is debunked immediately. When they mentioned MK Ultra, I was like, Toby's ears just pricked up right now. But there's a lot more going on there in terms of Ted Kaczynski's background, his education there, and the time at which a lot of these psychiatric issues that he was experiencing. I mean, I think it's pretty clear to us, the contemporary listener, that he was experiencing some psychiatric issues, from his teenage years forward at this time that he was at Harvard. And I was just thinking, what does Toby know about this time? What is he getting from this that I am not getting? Because he probably knows a whole lot about this context that I don't know about. So can you just talk about what you were hearing there that was probably beyond what I was hearing there in that part of the podcast?
Sure. So I actually, the stuff about Harvard, I think comes from this book called Harvard and the Unabomber, and it's by this guy, Alston Chase. And I actually read it when I was doing research for my third novel, because I thought some of the stuff in it was pretty interesting. So I don't know if it was so much debunked. Ted Kaczynski definitely was involved. I guess you hear a tape of it in this sort of experiment, which you wouldn't be able to do now with human subjects protections, by this guy, Henry Murray. But what Alston Chase kind of talks about is about how he thinks his time at Harvard was sort of formative for Ted Kaczynski in leading him towards being the Unabomber. And he sort of hits on a few things. One is Kaczynski shows up and he's 16 and he's already sort of socially ostracized and awkward, even amongst, people who are roughly his age. And then he shows up to Harvard and it's like all these kids are older. He's still odd. And so he is absolutely isolated. And the second thing, which I think is the most interesting part, even more than the sort of MK Ultra stuff, is that when he showed up at Harvard was when they began to institute a core curriculum, which were certain classes that everybody had to take. And according to Alston Chase in this book, he basically says that, for somebody who's really paying attention, two of the main themes that came out of this core curriculum were that technology is inherently causes alienation in people. People become alienated as more technology is added to their lives. And then the second thing was technology is expanding and it's not going to stop. It's just going to continue going. So his sort of thesis is that this curriculum for somebody who is very smart and impressionable and was paying attention would lead to despair, right? And so he thinks that's what Kaczynski left Harvard with, was this just sort of deep dread about the future because of the expansion of technology and what it would mean for people. And that's, that's essentially what he writes about in his manifesto.
On this avoiding of society, or this society is a bad thing, is that why you're trying to grow that beard?
No.
I mean, are you conforming with the nonconformist?
No, I'm not conforming with the nonconformist.
Well,
if I were conforming with the nonconformist, if I were conforming with the nonconformist, I mean, really, this isn't really a beard yet.
You're darn right it's not.
Isn't it quaint that you could be filled with despair about the world because of technology instead of everything we're filled with despair about right now?
But also, I mean, I listen to this and I'm like, isn't he very likely a paranoid schizophrenic? I mean, this just seems to be this like...
Both things can be true.
I understand both things can be true, but there seems to be this very like, I mean, I'm thinking of the Beautiful Mind guy, John Nash, right? Paranoid schizophrenic, genius, paranoid schizophrenic. I'm thinking about all of the people who in the world have these IQs of 160 and above. And I'm not saying that everybody who's that smart is a paranoid schizophrenic, but there are like, you know, there seems to be this like weird correlation between people who are hyper geniuses and, you know, like a locus between that and early onset mental illness of some kind. Not causation, but that seems to be like a thing here where I'm like, what's wrong with Ted? I'm like, he seems to be very mentally ill as well. And so, like, if that's part of the core curriculum, he left with that. Wasn't it more easily implanted because he probably suffers from some sort of mental illness?
Yeah, I mean, I read this book years ago, and I don't remember if he has, like, much of an opinion about Kaczynski's, like, mental health, although I think clearly there's something going on there. But I think what he's saying is, you know, the philosophy that he came up with and the things that he was angry about were sort of a logical outshoot of what he was taught at Harvard.
Yeah, yeah.
But not everybody reacts to it that way. But you did get the feeling that he saw technology as this freaking snowball coming down a hill, and he did not want any part of it.
Yeah, yeah. Laura, a big part of the core of this podcast is the relationship between Ted and his brother, David. They grew up in this it's portrayed as a relatively normal home in the suburbs of Chicago. They are both obviously very, very smart. Obviously, Ted is genius level smart. David is obviously just very, very smart. Also got into an Ivy League college, so no slouch himself. Idolizes his older brother in a way that on its face is just heartbreaking. You know, if Ted had turned out to be regular math professor, genius level math professor, it would still be sort of hard. I mean, if you have two sons like I do, it already, like, the idolization of an older brother by younger brother is on his face already sort of like sweet and heartbreaking on its own. But this is really the core of the episodes we've listened to so far, especially when we know what ends up happening. What do you think of the way this relationship is portrayed, especially as Ted starts to go on the decline and David starts to really perceive it and in some ways follow him down those dark paths, even as he knows that there's something really wrong with Ted, as he puts it?
Oh, yeah. I thought this was interesting because you do have that sibling dynamic, but, you know, following along, you can see how this evolves. And I just thought it was really interesting how, you know, they buy this plot of land together in Montana. The two of them go out there. David travels there. He's going to build his own cabin. Ted doesn't let him do it. So then when David moves to Texas and you hear this description that he's living a simple life and living off the grid and the land or whatever, you're envisioning he's just like the Texas version of Ted Kaczynski. But this is where you start to see a shift in his approach to how he is living his life. And he has like pink trim on the outside of his little off the grid thing. And he's got neat little rugs inside. And even though he has these kerosene lamps or whatever, you know, to go from this sort of evolution of we're going to live the same way to no, actually, I'm not going to live like that, to then being like, wait a minute, this could be my brother that sent this manifesto, which, by the way, they didn't cover. I was reading a little more about that. Actually, it was Linda who first noticed that it was is Ted, not David, which I thought was also very interesting.
That blew my mind. That's something I did not know. And I don't know if it has, I mean, the story that we've always heard is that it was his brother who turned him in. Linda apparently knew it from the many reports that had been published in the Washington Post and the New York Times that she was reading while she was in Paris. She was reading these snippets while they were posting these small excerpts of the manifesto, thinking, this sounds like Ted. This sounds like Ted. This sounds like Ted. And then when her husband landed there for vacation, was like, we need to talk. Not now, I'm tired, takes a nap and was like, I think your brother is the Unabomber. And he's like, can't be true.
We were kind of alone on that part of the street, and Linda said that this sounded like my brother's ideology, and she wondered if the Unabomber might be my brother. And my first reaction was, oh, thank God. It's nothing real. It's just, Ted can't possibly be the Unabomber.
This story is incredible. It was later when they published the manifesto, they're in Connecticut, and they have to go to the library to look at the manifesto online at her university. And I love the scene where he's like, I was expecting to go, open it, see page 1 and think, no way. Is it my brother? No way. And he opens the manifesto and he's like, my heart sank. I realized it was him. But it was Linda. It was Linda. It was his wife.
The lovely Linda.
Women know. Women fucking have creep radar. We know. We know.
So Ted was right to be distrustful of Linda.
All right. Ironic.
But she did get David out of Texas. I guess he's glamping, right?
Yeah, she made his cabin. She made his house nicer. But Toby, I mean that thread was the David Ted thread is freaking heartbreaking, right?
Yeah, I mean it's because you get the sense that David, he had a little more traditional sort of approach to high school and stuff, where maybe he wasn't super popular, but he's into sports but they both, they're both very. Like, he becomes fixated on this girl in his math class and basically forsakes all other women until how many decades later he gets back together with her. It's very odd. But he kind of follows, again, it's like this little brother, big brother thing where he follows them in these very bizarre ways of like living off the land to the point where he's almost doing it more extremely. But then once he gets some kind of normalcy in his life, particularly with this woman, the backlash from Ted is so, scathing and absolute that, it's heartbreaking. And then it's also heartbreaking the fact that he has to make this decision to let, the FBI know that I think I know who it is. I think it's my brother and all that follows. I mean, it is kind of, it's a classic tragedy.
So, Kevin, we have to talk about episode 3.
Oh, yeah.
Hellfire Club, which I just kept thinking of.
This is North Shore General.
Yeah, this Dungeons and Dragons Club on the North Shore of Chicago.
Strategic Command
North Shore
or something.
Strategic Command or whatever they were called. Where, by the way, one of the guys did have connections to 2 of the bombing victims. His mother worked at the college of one of them, and one of the other ones was a professor whose class he had just dropped. So I do understand.
Well, he was on the same package, right? The return
address.
address.
The return address and the to address.
Correct.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree that he could have been a strong suspect, which, arguably
on
true.
paper, obviously, yeah.
So that leads us to this group of Dungeons and Dragons guys. And then we have the guy, Jeff, the loudmouth, who just won't stop talking. And then we have the other guy who to this day thinks that Jeff is the Unabomber. Thoughts?
Yeah, Jeff's not the Unabomber.
Well, I don't know. He's pretty sure he is.
It is fun. Okay, by the way, we find out at the end on the list of 600 suspects, those guys were number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's fucking amazing. I do see, right, like on its face, you think that if the bombing is a personal cause, then you would want to look at, who would want to do harm to, the first target, that professor. So, yeah, it obviously makes sense that you would go and ask, but they certainly sounded like either A, they had a hard-on for getting this guy, or Jeff came in and after 4 hours of hearing bullshit, opened his mouth and said the wrong goddamn thing.
I finally said to the ATF agents, look, if we wanted to kill people, and we don't, there would be much better ways to do it than a matchstick bomb. And of course, that perked them up. And they asked me to explain the better ways, which I proceeded to do.
Well, not to mention the John Prine lyrics, man. They totally were very suspicious. Although
that's fucking stupid.
Although the FBI didn't even care about the John Prine lyrics.
No.
Although that connection, though, was so funny. Like revenge, red balloons, and then Eric is like, they weren't balloons, they were polka dots. And then it was like all the details were wrong.
Not an English teacher.
No, but for real, to this, first of all, I couldn't get over the fact that And it did make a whole lot of sense. Every time a new investigator would come on, they would start at step 1 again and go back. And every time one of them would meet a new girlfriend, they'd have to say to the parents, like,
the way.
So here's the thing.
If you get a call from the FBI,
the FBI
this is
is
why.
probably going to call. They think I'm the Unabomber. I'm not. Here's why they think it. Like, it's really interesting. And this is, again, an untold story. So, Laura, I had never heard a story like this before of what it must be like to be the subject of a Unabomber investigation for a huge swath of your life and have to explain to friends and family and parents of girlfriends in perpetuity. Yes, people think I'm the Unabomber, but I promise you I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, as if Dungeons and Dragons didn't have enough of a stereotype attached to it already. Now we have this. But what I liked about this part of the story is when you have that one new guy in the FBI who's like, I want to talk to you, but it's because I want to finally get you off the list. And it was amazing.
I'm thinking the same thing, Toby.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, bullshit.
Yeah, like that's what every cop says.
Yeah, but he did. He got him off the list, Toby. I liked it. I was buying into the romance of it. I was like, isn't that guy so nice? He's going to get him off the list. And he can just go play Dungeons and Dragons in his mom's basement or whatever.
He told 600 people the same thing.
Yeah. Help me, help you.
Yes.
Plot twist. Wouldn't it be amazing if Jeff actually turns out to be the Unabomber?
Yeah.
He's not the Unabomber.
Ted wants to take credit for it because, he wrote the manifesto, but it's actually Jeff this whole time.
Yeah.
One final question for you, Kevin. I know we've heard for many years that Ted Kaczynski's cabin was 10 by 12.
Yeah.
All I kept thinking was 10 by 12. That is smaller than our bedroom by
That's like Studio C here.
That is literally about 2 feet bigger.
A little more,
either way than the closet we're sitting in right now. Amazing,
Tiny house
right?
hunters.
Yes, he was into tiny houses.
Yeah, he was ahead of the curve.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Do you remember, guys, when we did we reviewed Unabomber, which was a miniseries starring
didn't
Sam
that suck?
Worthington? It did, but remember the gist of the story was that he was, I think it was Fitz or something like that. He was a linguistic profiler, something like no one's ever done. And so he went into the manifesto and water or something stupid like that, and realized, I don't know, he had some revelation about, that he could profile based on the language and no one ever did it.
Yep.
And that's how they captured the Unabomber, and it wasn't the thing. It's like, no.
It was Linda.
It was still the story that we heard, that it was the brother.
It's even more like that whole concept is so fucked up because that was how they screwed up the anthrax through the mail stuff. Is they got a guy, some linguistic expert who was like, it was definitely this dude, and it wasn't. And it was just this linguistic guy was just totally off. It's just another one of those sort of bullshit, forensic things. Yeah.
You know what pisses me off about that? The woman FBI agent in this podcast, right? She's not the linguistics person, but she's the person who worked on the Unabom task force, along with, there was the hard-boiled guy who was very old-fashioned, and then there was her who was the social worker one. She was the one who wanted it printed because she knew someone might know who made it, right? And they ultimately were like, all right, you're probably right? Why didn't they make the Unabomber miniseries about her and that guy? So much more interesting than the linguistics thing, right?
I don't know.
And by the way, Sam Worthington.
I think it was on Discovery. Who the fuck remembers that thing?
Sam Worthington also played that horrible.
I will give you $1,000 each if you could tell me anything about that and whether you were thumbs up or thumbs down.
I was a thumbs down 100%.
I think everyone was probably a thumbs down. Yes, exactly.
I recall that quite clearly.
I'm going to write you a check.
Okay, Sam Worthington was Jake Sully in Avatar, right?
Yes.
And he was also just in that on that thing we just watched about Under the Banner of Heaven. He was Dan, not the one with the voice, but the other one, right? All right.
But Dan, what if you were the Unabomber? Then you could send things through the mail. Heavenly Father would not approve. Or would he?
Huge RV hogging the right lane. Oh, here comes the new Toyota Grand Highlander.
That's the Cooper family. Look at them go, Jim.
The Coopers are in the clear.
With available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain, life's grander in the first ever Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.
I want people to understand this ordeal, it's taken a toll on both of us.
Casey Anthony's parents respond after 15 years of allegations.
I've gotten blamed for something I didn't do, and it tears me up inside.
This can change our life. This is serious.
This is their final response.
The test is about to begin. Please remain still.
Casey Anthony's parents, the lie detector test. Watch now, only on A&E. And watch next day on the A&E app.
The friendship is sharing deal.
Because I want one of your McNuggets.
And I need some of your Quarter Pounder.
There's a deal for everyone at McDonald's. Get one favorite like 10-piece chicken McNuggets, a Quarter Pounder, or a Big Mac and get another for just $1. Price and participation may vary. Valid for item of equal or lesser value.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out the new Apple Originals podcast, Project Unabom. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this new podcast?
Yeah, this is a thumbs up. I always say, like Kevin pointed out, I always say, why now? Why now? Well, why now? We're in this huge period of time with domestic terrorism being at an all-time high. We've listened to all of our various Leah Satili reporting projects about that sort of phenomenon that is happening in the country. But, I think the telling of this story, the host and the narrator and the research is really interesting. I found some of the angles about suspects that were considered suspects for a long time before they were cleared to be a really interesting addition to some of the past reporting and stories that we've seen about the Unabomber. And, I also, in this particular telling, was really drawn to the story of the two brothers and their relationship and how that sort of played into things. So this is a thumbs up for me.
Toby Ball.
Yeah, so I'm a thumbs up, first of all. I think it's obviously really well done. This is actually something I knew a fair amount about, so it wasn't like a nonstop parade of surprises, but they do break some new ground. A couple of things that kind of stuck out to me was, they are kind of walking this thin line between, because, enough of that stuff is out there that they have to both, have enough of that story so that people who don't know the Unabomber story are engaged and know what's going on. And at the same time, they have to have new stuff, right? So that people such as myself who know the story pretty well have a reason to listen beyond just sort of the general excellence of what they're doing. And they do that. And it's episode 3 about alternative subjects and then sort of focusing on the brother. At times, it felt like we were getting a little far away from the core piece of Ted Kaczynski being the Unabomber. Spoiler alert, I guess. But
literally no spoilers.
Yeah, that's true.
This happened 25 years ago.
Well, it might be this guy. But
no spoiler.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll beep that out. It's fine.
So that's really just a quibble, and it's not something, if I wasn't reviewing it on a podcast, I probably would just completely ignore, because the storytelling is really good. I found myself fully engaged the whole time, even in stuff I already kind of knew. The quality of the podcast is really high. So big thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up. This is excellent. I think if I had a quibble, it might be that we might have a little too much of David talking, Ted's childhood, but that is a super quibble. I thought this was excellent. We didn't even talk about the idea that there is a library that houses all of Ted Kaczynski's bullshit.
Yay, librarians.
I think I'm going to offer all of my stuff all my completed works to some library.
And is it bullshit? That's the question, right?
Well, I think the more bullshit, the more the library will enjoy it.
But that's the question. That's a big question. I think it's interesting.
So this is very well done. I thought the sound design was great. The reporting is excellent. You do get some new things. So whether you remember a lot about the Unabomber case or you're coming to it with fresh eyes and ears, I think you'll have something here. I'm really looking forward to getting to the end of this series. And, sort of seeing I don't want to put it this way, but, sort of what the point is. We're hearing this stuff. I feel like it's leading to some kind of, I don't want to say a conclusion that means an ending, but an idea about sort of what all this means. I guess a bigger picture, or what are the stakes? I don't know exactly.
Did you say what are the stakes?
What are the stakes here? Answer that stupid question. Anyway, I think it's great, and more podcasts should be like this.
Yeah. What Kevin's stupid question? What are the stakes aside?
That's an inside baseball.
No, it's not. It's the stupidest question about narrative ever. What are the stakes? But no, yes, I agree with everything you said, Kevin. Eric Benson does a great job here. And yes, we did neglect to talk about the incredible fact that this all starts in a library with like a ton of boxes of stuff that includes copies of letters such as, Mom, stop sending me smoked oysters. For God's sakes, Ted, why did you make a copy of that goddamn letter? Real question.
Because he didn't like photocopiers.
Real question. Why would you copy that letter? Anyway, I really love this podcast. This is my favorite kind of podcast because, well, first of all, it's the kind I go into with high expectations, and I'm honestly terrified that I'm not going to like it because it's like, I know the people who made it. It's maybe people that I have made great stuff. And I'm like, what if it sucks? But also it's something that I know something about. So I'm like, what could I possibly get out of it? And of course, episode 1, I already get stuff. And episode 2, I get more stuff. And episode 3 was freaking great. And then, of course, episode 4 ends up being like super heartbreaking. So there's a lot of, aside from information here, there's a lot of emotional depth here, which I was not expecting. The sound design is perfect. The music is surprising and perfect. I'm really loving Project Unabom. I'm definitely going to listen to the rest of the series, even though we have finished reviewing our job here. So yeah, huge thumbs up for me for this podcast, and I cannot wait to listen to the rest of it. Now it's time for my favorite part of our podcast, a little something I like to call the crime of the week. See if this one passes the sniff test. Researchers say people who share the same smell are more likely to become friends. Other mammals sniff one another to determine friend or foe. Why not humans? Researchers assembled 24 same-sex, non-romantic friends who described themselves as having hit it off immediately. They made the friends and others in a control group wear T-shirts that were put in bags and measured with a device called an electronic nose. They later did the smell test with a human. Both the machine and the person could identify which pairs were friends and which were strangers. To test whether the smell was a predictor of friendship, researchers had strangers sit close, not speak, and do one of those mirror games. Later, they asked which of the participants they felt the most chemistry with and those they didn't. Based on their smells, the electric nose predicted who would click and who wouldn't almost 3/4 of the time. Unlike animals who rely on sense, humans rely on language and reason to distinguish friends from foes. But next time you say goodbye to your buds, tell them, smell ya later. So panel, your nose knows. Please describe the smell of your best friend. Laura Bricker, what do you think?
Tuna fish.
Ew! It's my cat!
Yeah.
It's my cat! Now I get it. Toby Ball.
I was like, I've hung out with some of Laura's friends, and I was like, do any of them smell like tuna fish? That's
I don't
really
think they do.
strange. All right.
Toby Ball, what do you think? What does your best friend smell like?
I think alcohol-infused sweat.
Kevin Flynn, what do you think?
Fart burps.
Yeah. I got to say, that's pretty much accurate. Mine? Jumpsuits from eBay.
Oh.
All right, that's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
We do have a cat of the week this week. This is a true crime cat of the week update.
Wow. I'm going to add some echo to that. Good job, Laura Bricker.
Didn't see that coming.
Wow.
And it comes to us from Sinead McAleer.
Is that Irish cat?
Yes. And this is a cat that was cat of the week. Early, Chester was jumping over toilet rolls in the early pandemic times. Remember, we had a video where the cat went,
yeah,
in like slow motion. Well, now it has been a long journey, a lot of him just steering the other direction. But finally, Chester can ring a bell for treats.
Nice.
Oh, this video was awesome. Yeah.
Yes. So I would like my cats to learn how to do this. Unfortunately, Rocky Flintstone, who's now on a special urinary diet, just sits in front of me and like howls at me to give him his special food now. So no, I think ringing the bell would be a little more, acceptable.
All right. Well, Laura Bricker, folks want to reach out to you and give you their tips for teaching your cats to ring bells to get treats. How can they find you on Twitter?
They can find me at Lara Bricker.
And of course, you can submit your cat of the week or any kind of pet to be cat of the week to us. It doesn't have to be a cat at crimewriterson@gmail.com or submit them to us on Facebook at any of our groups. We will accept them anywhere. Toy Ball, folks want to reach out to you and say, I would like to meet your friends who smell like alcohol-infused sweat. How can they find you on Twitter?
At TobyBallNH.
Kevin Flynn, how about you? How can you be found on the internet?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And if you want to follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Reb Lavoie. Follow the show at Crime Writers On and join our incredible community in our really, really rad Crime Writers On Facebook group. Just go to Facebook, search for Crime Writers On our podcast, and then hit join the group. Answer a couple questions. If you're not a jerk, we will let you in.
A lot of people still entering.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Like we
more
got
than
everybody,
ever.
but no, more people keep coming.
Come on in. Support the show at patreon.com/partners in crime media. You'll get all the extra stuff we have back there. It is great. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our line editor is the rad Olivia Burdett. The executive producer of this show is Kevin Flynn. This podcast was recorded in the Yoga Loft above the Bodega in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we ask you not to send smoked oysters and only nuts, dried fruit, and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you
later.
I'm experimenting with all the, the cans that you can buy in the grocery store. They're max 5%, like the seltzers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I've been experimenting with those, which I really like.
Yes.
But yesterday, I went to the liquor store with Teddy, and he was like, you should try some of these like high test cans, Mom, that are like 12%.
Oh, my God.
So we bought a bunch, and man, they will knock you on your ass.
Yeah. Who knew Rebecca liked it in the can so much?
Oh, stop it.
Oh.
See if this one passes the sniff test. Ew. That was boogery. Don't do that. See if this one passes the sniff test. So gross.
Partners in Crime Media. Huge RV hogging the right lane. Oh, here comes the new Toyota Grand Highlander.
That's the Cooper family. Look at them go, Jim.
The Coopers are in the clear.
With available 362 horsepower hybrid max powertrain, life's grander in the first ever Grand Highlander. Toyota, let's go places.